Good morning. Gruesome discovery. A body presumed to be that of missing Yale student Annie Lay found stuffed in the wall of a campus building on what was supposed to be her wedding day. This morning, the latest on the investigation and the growing fears at Yale. All eyes on Jay Leno, set to make his primetime debut tonight. Will he change the face of television? This morning, he speaks out about the laughs he has in store and the pressures he feels. And wild weekend, from an amazing shot to an ugly outburst on the U.S. Open court. To an embarrassing scene at the VMAs as rapper Kanye West interrupts an acceptance speech by teen star Taylor Swift.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
We've got lots to tape to talk about today, Monday, September 14th, 2009.
From NBC News, this is Today with Matt Lauer and Meredith Vieira, live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on a Monday morning. I'm Matt Lauer.
And I'm Ann Curry in for Meredith this morning. Good morning, everybody. We begin with a real tragedy because police are now treating this Annie Lay case as a homicide, Matt.
That's right, with good reason. They found what they believe to be the 24-year-old's body on Sunday, the very day she was supposed to be married. The body hidden in the walls of a university building where Lay was last seen on Tuesday. Now, police want to know who else had access to that building. We're going to have much more from the Yale campus coming up in just a couple of minutes.
Very scary times there. Also ahead, new revelations from Ted Kennedy's memoir, which he did not want released until after his death. His sons, Ted Jr. and Patrick, will be here to talk about the life of their father and the legacy he leaves behind in a live interview this morning.
But we want to begin on this Monday morning with that shocking discovery of a body on the campus of Yale University, believed to be that of missing grad student and bride-to-be Annie Lay. NBC's Jeff Rawson is there with the latest on this story. Jeff, good morning to you.
Matt, good morning to you. This is tough to even talk about, but that body was found inside of a wall in the basement of the research lab right behind me where Annie Lay was last seen. Police are going on the theory right now. This was a pretty well-planned attack, and it makes sense if you think about it. Happened right in the middle of the school day, broad daylight. More than 70 surveillance cameras were rolling in this building alone, yet the killer was able to do it and get away. This morning, the obvious question: who would want this girl dead, and why? The timing is as awful as the outcome itself. On what was supposed to be Annie Lay's wedding day, the happiest moment of her life, police found what they believe is her lifeless body stuffed inside a wall at this Yale research lab. Annie was last seen on surveillance tape walking into this building at 10 a.m. Tuesday. With all the searching and the missing person flyers, she was here the entire time.
She hasn't been positively identified as of this time. However, we're assuming that it is her at this time, so we are treating it as a homicide.
Overnight, the building was locked down. On Yale's campus, the investigation now intensifies. There's a killer on the loose, a killer with an unknown motive who so far outsmarted even the FBI. It took them 5 days to find the body.
I met earlier this evening with Annie's family, with her fiancé and his family, and I conveyed to them all the deeply felt support of the entire Yale University community.
Friends say Annie Lay loved two things: working toward her dual medical degree and her fiancé, Jonathan Wadowski. "Lucky I'm in love with my best friend," she wrote on her Facebook page. Late last night, on their would-be wedding day, he got the call confirming what friends suspected all along: his bride-to-be was murdered.
This just sounds like a classic bad movie. I mean, from the start to the finish, I mean, just watching this thing unravel, it's just been a nightmare. For him, being the groom-to-be, he probably had just the same amount of expectation and excitement for this week, and then just for it to all crumble down.
Annie's friends admit when the FBI got involved right away, pouring through Yale's trash and questioning students, they knew this day would come.
She was not only book smart, she was street smart. Therefore, I think that if somebody were trying to kidnap her, it had to have been really thought out, very planned. They would have had to have been watching her and even just studying her day to day. They knew where she was at all times.
And that's what homicide detectives will focus on now. Who had access to the research lab? And who would want this popular medical student dead? A young life cut short before the new chapter even started.
Sunday morning, there was no party, there was no happiness, there was no bringing together of two lives. It's like a big shattered dream.
To get into that research lab, you need a Yale University ID card like this one, and these ID cards have magnetic strips on the back. You put it up to a sensor, the door opens, so if this was an inside job, Ann, police will be able to track who went into that building when.
All right, Jeff Rosson this morning. Jeff, thanks. Laurel Griffith was a high school friend of Annie Lay's. Laurel, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ann.
You were senior class president. She was valedictorian. You kept together in touch on Facebook.
Matt? All right, Al, thanks very much. As NBC's Chuck Todd mentioned a second ago, President Obama delivers a major speech today on the economy exactly a year after the financial collapse that triggered the economic crisis. The question, has anything really changed on Wall Street? Here to debate that is CNBC's Erin Burnett and also MSNBC's Dylan Ratigan. Hey, folks, good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Before we look forward and where we are today, let's look back, okay? A year ago today, Lehman Brothers, we've got them going belly up, basically. Other things happened within about a week or 2 week period, and a lot of people, experts in the financial world, said we were this close to the financial abyss. Looking back, how close were we?
We were pretty darn close. I would say we were incredibly close. You know, we talked to the Treasury Secretary in a town hall last week, and we said, how close do we come to not being able to get money out of the ATM? And his answer was amazingly close. I mean, it was a classic run on the bank, real fear situation.
And I think you're in one of those situations where you'll never know. You can't run a parallel universe where you have different decisions that get made,
right,
and so you get a different data set. But what we do know is, to Erin's point, that the level, not only were the fear levels at levels we hadn't seen since the Depression, but more important than that, that the risk level, we knew how much money we had and we knew how much money we owed. And we knew how big that difference was. And the combination of the fear and the gap, I think that at the very least you had a response, that was stabilizing, and also I think very telling as to how much risk there was, which is a good indication for us going forward.
If you look at where we are right now, folks, there are signs of recovery and there are still signs of weakness. I think a lot of people would point to the unemployment numbers right now as a strong sign of weakness. So where do we stand right now as compared to where we were a year ago?
You know, that's an interesting question. Technically speaking, and I emphasize the word technically, we are coming out of a recession. The economy in this country is going to grow this quarter. Cash for clunkers, auto plants reopened. You're going to see technical growth. But for most people, it isn't going to feel anything like we're coming out of a recession. Unemployment is still high. And perhaps most important, housing. Housing prices are still lower. People's mortgages are still underwater. We're not seeing modification of mortgages. Those two issues for most people mean the recession is not over.
And because there are so many businesses in this country that have proven themselves unable to function without being supported by the taxpayer,
right,
because we have business models that have proven themselves not viable independently, whether it was what we saw with the cars or the banks, we are at a situation where we don't have the natural cleansing in business because we are falsely perpetuating failed businesses like Citigroup and AIG.
10 seconds left. The president's going to call today for stricter regulations. Also going to call for Wall Street to police itself to avoid future catastrophe.
It's nothing better than
what does history tell us about that?
I think that's pretty clear. Not anything good. Although it's interesting, Treasury is saying right now they're worried too little risk is being taken on Wall Street right now, not too much, which I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear.
My biggest one is the ethics of the people in charge, the people at our Treasury, the people that are advising our president. We're too responsible for building the system that has failed to be trusted.
Not too optimistic there, Dylan. Thank you very much, Erin. Nice to see you as well.
Cheer up, Dylan.
And Dylan
it's
will
like
have
OJ's
more
in charge
later
of the crime scene. You sit there and you're like,
He'll have more later this morning on his MSNBC show, Morning Meeting. It is now 7:19. Once again, here's Ann.
Matt, thanks. Tonight's the night the Jay Leno show makes its much-anticipated debut later this evening here on NBC. And NBC's Lee Cowan is inside Jay's new digs, where it all kicks off tonight. Lucky you, Lee. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Ann. He's got a brand new time slot. He's got this brand new set. He's got a new theme music, the whole 9 yards. But to Jay Leno, though, it's still the same old brand of what he calls big tent comedy that's worked for him for years. Does he think this whole thing's a gamble? Of course he does. Is he worried about it? Well, not the comedy part.
The hardest part is really getting your new set to work, because you essentially go into a big empty soundstage and you hang lights and you think everything's all right, and then you go,
For Jay Leno, technical gremlins are the least of his worries. A lot is riding on tonight's grand 10 p.m. experiment. Time magazine said it was nothing less than the future of network television. No pressure.
Are you worried about it just because it is such a, or do you think all the hype about it being different?
No, I don't worry about it because I'm rich already. Doesn't bother me. Yeah, not my problem. You know what it is? I did the Tonight Show for 17 years. It was #1 when I got it. It was #1 when I handed it off. If this doesn't work, 5 years from now, people go, did you do something after the Tonight Show? Me? No. You didn't have another show? No.
Where are we going? Down this way? This way. See, we're going this way. We're lost.
It's a comedic dodge to a serious question. But behind the scenes, Jay takes the pressure seriously.
This is where you walk out right now?
You go through the big supermarket doors.
Since leaving the Tonight Show, he's been chin deep in making sure the show sells. From testing out new jokes to the seating of the studio audience up close.
Anything can happen. You get the occasional nutcase that will try to attack you. I mean, that's happened, and it's all right.
Whether his comedy show can compete with pricey primetime dramas like CSI is unknown. Leno views success much like a punchline. It's all in the delivery.
You try to have a little something for everybody. You try to have something smart, something silly, something goofy, and that's, you put it all together.
Some of this, I would imagine, is just sort of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
It's hardly scientific, and there's no thought goes into it at all. Even the idea of throwing it on the wall and sticking is, wow, that's more effort than we put in.
His musical sidekick, Kevin Eubanks, will be back, and most of his writers and stage crew, too. But beyond that, the Jay Leno Show is different. More comedy, less talk, all at a much faster pace.
Yeah, before you kind of do the joke, the monologue, first guest, commercial, dopey actress, band, and you're out of there. No, that's gone. You got to lose the whole dopey actress part.
There will be celebrity interviews, although Jay's familiar desk is gone. And Jay won't carry the show alone. He'll be joined by a team of comics. Correspondents, he calls them, much like The Daily Show. All of it is uncharted, sort of like trying out a new joke on the road, which Jay still does, almost every other weekend.
Are you still having fun?
Yeah, I have a lot of fun. I'm the oldest quarterback out there, and you're in a young person's game, and you're competing reasonably competitively. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
The way Leno looks at it, he's a nightclub comic who just happens to be a broadcaster. A hobby, almost. But the stakes are high.
Now, unlike The Tonight Show, he's only going to have musical guests on about 2 nights a week. Tonight is one of them. It's Jay-Z, Rihanna, and Kanye West who made those headlines. As for the first celebrity guest, well, not surprisingly, it's a comedian, Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, very good. Okay, Lee Cowan, thanks so much. I mean, I may be against the prevailing view, but I think it's going to do really well. People want to laugh.
I hope it's a hit, and Jay's going to have the chance to say to Kanye West tonight what he said to Hugh Grant those years ago. What were you thinking? Should be interesting for the response.
No kidding. Yeah. Well, you can catch the premiere of The Jay Leno Show tonight at 10, 9 Central Time here on NBC. And coming up this morning, the trial of Amanda Knox, the American student accused of murder in Italy, getting back underway this morning. And there is a new wrinkle in the case that could greatly prolong this trial. The latest on this. But first, this today on NBC.
Matt? All right, Al, thank you very much. Now to Senator Ted Kennedy's labor of love. True Compass, the memoir he worked to finish in his final months but didn't want released until after his death. It hits bookstores today. We're going to talk to his sons, Ted Jr. and Patrick, in a moment. But first, NBC's Andrea Mitchell has more. Andrea, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. For the first time, we are learning the inside story of a Kennedy life from one of the original brothers. This is the only memoir ever written by a Kennedy. It's published today, and it arrived at the senator's Hyannisport home on the day he finally took to his bed. He died later that night, and according to the publisher, he most likely never saw the book that he struggled so hard to finish. In True Compass, Teddy Kennedy reveals the lessons of a lifetime. From his privileged youth as the youngest Kennedy child to the burdens of being the only surviving son. He was reflective, talking with his publisher last February.
Sometime in your life, you have to recognize that there's an extraordinary opportunity to put down some thoughts that you have that are relevant to your service in the United States Senate, and that's what I've tried to do.
His memoir is a fascinating account of his childhood, including some tough lessons from his father.
I had a sit down with my dad. He said, I just want you to know I have other children that are out there that intend to have a purposeful and constructive life. And so you have to make up your mind about which direction you're going to go.
What emerges in the book is how scarred Kennedy was by his brother's assassinations. First Jack, then Bobby.
Those of us who loved him and who take him to his rest today.
He writes how he feared he too would be shot, flinching at 21 gun salutes at Arlington Cemetery. Recoiling when a car backfired, recalls former aide Tom Rollins.
He did a magnificent job of containing the anxiety that had to be part of that. I never saw him sweated. I saw him drop to the ground like a stone when there was a loud bang. I saw him tell me to, take a boombox away when he thought it was ticking like a bomb, but I never saw him sweat.
As the senator has now written, it is why after losing the nomination to Jimmy Carter in 1980, he granted his children's wish not to run again for president. In the end, Ted Kennedy passed the torch of his legacy to his family and to a new, young president.
What we face, he wrote, is above all a moral issue. At stake are not just the details of policy, but fundamental principles of social justice and the character of our country.
Kennedy pulls back the curtain on the terrible losses of his life and his final battle with cancer, as well as the illnesses of his children. And then there is his final advice to his grandson, Teddy III. He writes, "Sure, there will be storms along the way, and you might not reach your goal right away, but if you do your best and keep a true compass, you'll get there." Matt?
All right, Andrea, thank you very much. Andrea Mitchell in Washington this morning. We're joined now by Senator Kennedy's sons, Ted Kennedy Jr. and Congressman Patrick Kennedy. Guys, good morning. My condolences to both of you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
You write a memoir, it's supposed to be revealing, it's supposed to be candid, but they aren't always. Were you surprised at some of the things your dad wrote in this about the assassination of his brothers and the loss of his sister in Chappaquiddick?
Well, listen, Matt, for one thing, everybody knows my dad wasn't the most sentimental, emotive, guys like to talk about his feelings much. I mean, he's old Irish in that respect. I mean, he taught us mostly by example in terms of his perseverance in life and how he got through difficult times just through his own example. So for us, this was an enormous revelation in a sense, because this book really was one where he talked about his feelings and emotions at various points in his life. Obviously, this last year was one where we got to know more about his feelings as he became more reflective about his life. And one of the best parts about having this extra year with him, where he knew about his impending mortality, was the fact that he was more forthcoming with his feelings. But really, this book is an enormous revelation for us in many respects, because these are stories that we never heard before.
Ted, do you think that he felt, Patrick says old Irish, but was there also this sense in your father that as the tragically anointed patriarch of this family that had seen so many tragedies, he had to hold the bold face?
He did, yes. I mean, he was the one who really had to hold it together. After all, he wasn't just a father to my brother and sister and me. He was the father to all of us in our family. And he did have to keep that stoicism. But I think, one of the remarkable things, and I just had the chance to read the book the first time, 2 days.
Must have been an extraordinary experience.
2 days after he died. Quite honestly, I was a little scared about what I might be reading about, but what I found was his voice speaking to me in an incredibly powerful way, and I was really comforted by the words in this book.
He talks about going back to the Senate after the assassination of Robert, and he says it was a need to fill his life with activity, quote, devastation about Bobby's death, and with it all my pent-up grief about Jack threatened to overtake me. I mean, it sounds like he really struggled with keeping it together internally.
He did.
Well, who wouldn't? After the suffering that he suffered. I mean, this was more than any human being could ever be imagined to carry. I mean, the violent deaths of 2 of his brothers right up close in public view, and then, of course, he lost his other siblings earlier in his life.
He talks about his first marriage to your mom, Joan, and he says, I do not blame Joan for the demise of our marriage, nor do I agree with some of the accounts that she has given as to the reasons for its demise. Was that one of those subjects that you were a little nervous about reading about?
No, I think that, my parents, as my dad talked about in the book, they got married when they were very young and really didn't know each other that well. I think a lot of people did in the late 1950s. So I thought he was very gracious, actually, towards my mother. And I think he recognized, took responsibility for the breakdown of their marriage. But what's really important is, I think, you know, how he dealt with these feelings and emotions. That's the most revealing out of this book.
Patrick, a lot of people were wondering, would he write about Chappaquiddick? And in fact, he did. He says it was something that haunted him every day of his life after the tragic death of Mary Jo Kopechne. There are still some people, though, and I'm calling you Patrick, I should call you Congressman.
Patrick's
I apologize,
great.
but the setting seems appropriate, who still feel that he didn't pay enough of a personal or political price for that event, and that he was a Kennedy and that made it go away. How do you respond when you hear that?
Well, obviously people have the entitled to their opinions, but the fact of the matter is this would have just paralyzed any normal person, and he spent his life working to improve the lives of many, and he has, in a sense, basically saved millions of people through his work on AIDS, through his work on health care, through his work on so many issues that are of vital importance to saving people's lives. And I think he spent his life trying to work to make up for his failings. And the real story of this book is how someone kept going in spite of otherwise being paralyzed. I think all of us could have just hung it up at that point. I certainly would have. And yet he carried on, and he did a terrific job. And that was what I think America's story is all about, is that in spite of all the biggest obstacles you could face, you could still be one who could make a difference in life.
Ted, let me end on a very simple note. He talked about his father, and for all of the high-profile jobs his dad, Joseph, held, he said, I always just thought of him as my dad. So tell me about Ted Kennedy as your dad and your dad. What was he like as a father?
Well, he was an incredible father and my best friend. He was so much fun to be with, and he was such a nice guy. And one of the things that comes across in the tributes, and even from his Republican colleagues, you know, Orrin Hatch and John McCain, they really liked him, and that's one of the reasons was one of the secret ingredients that he had that made him such a successful legislator. But you know, it was really he really felt that his family was his greatest treasure, and he made me feel special every single day of my life.
Again, our condolences, Ted Kennedy Jr., Congressman Patrick Kennedy. It's good to have you both here. Thanks very much for sharing your memories as well. And again, Senator Kennedy's memoir is called True Compass, and we're back right after this.